So in building the London Luton Airport project, we wanted to move away from the monolithic infrastructure it had before. It was on a 7-year-old Kentico project, to a new headless system using Content Stack. It was really important that this was flexible and could be used for many years to come. So we used a few elements of the Mac principles to make this happen. The first is that we use an API approach for the data that is pulled into the site. The main data really is the flight information feed that is pulled from an external source and is used to show the flights on the site, but also on terminals around the airport and various live screens. We used an API in Azure using the API Management Studio, Logic apps, function apps to pull that data in automatically every minute from the external source, have it in an API, which is then shown, pulled from the front end in a really performant way. The second part, we use the headless architecture to separate the front end from the back end to make it really efficient. It also means that we can change the front end at any point and the back end doesn't matter. We also used a modular approach so that every element on the site is its own module and can be stripped out, changed. If they, for example, want to change to a different feed or they want to use somebody else's parking, etc., we can easily swap that out without changing the whole site. So on London Luton Airport, performance and downtime are two critical issues that are super important to them. Over the years, they've had a few issues with peaks and spikes in traffic. For example, they had issues with a car park, they had issues with weather. A lot of people go to the site. The site needs to be available when the traffic spikes by sometimes 500, 600%. How did we do that? We used a multi-level caching approach. So we used caching in .NET, we used caching in Redis, and we used caching in Cloudflare. We used Content Stack to push the content and also use their webhooks so that when content is changed, it automatically purges that single page in Cloudflare so that it is seen. We also use a really performant infrastructure in Azure to make sure that the site does not go down. We use Azure Front Door as a load balancer. We have multiple servers behind that. The traffic therefore goes through Cloudflare to Front Door to the servers. We have that level of redundancy in place. Should those spikes appear, they're not going to affect the site. So on London Luton Airport, using Content Stack, we use a number of features that are available out of the box to enable a successful project. First is obviously the content modeling. It has a really good way of modeling content within the system that allows us to do a data normalization task from the old site and pull the data in to the format that needs to be shown. We also use webhooks to clear the cache when it's cached in Cloudflare, so that if content is updated, it is automatically shown correctly on the site. We also built our own apps within Content Stack for certain elements. So this might be previewing the content within Content Stack itself, other elements. The back end is quite flexible for a headless system, which allows us to change it and introduce elements that are not out of the box. So on London Luton Airport, we use Content Stack for the content platform. This really streamlined the process. On a monolithic or traditional system, when you do the project, you would normally have to build the entire system, go through all the different phases, and then when you're happy and it's been tested, you give it to the client and they populate. This obviously adds time onto the end of the project. However, using Content Stack, we can build the content model up front and then allow the client to populate while we are still building, because the front end and the back end are completely separate. So as long as we've got the content model correct, which we will have done through the data normalization task, then they are happy to just go ahead and populate while we are building. This takes time off the end of the project, so anywhere between 2 weeks to a couple of months, you launch quicker because it is done a lot quicker. So London Luton Airport wanted to move away from a traditional monolithic system to a headless system. We helped them to find a number of platforms, one of which was Content Stack, and aided with them to get demos and help them understand how it works. We also helped them understand how much content they needed to put in, the different size of the stacks they needed, etc. And we worked with our account manager at Content Stack to help them with that. We have a good relationship with Content Stack, and they are there to help us. They also helped us during the build. There were certain elements that maybe didn't work quite how we wanted in Content Stack. We therefore we got in contact with our account manager, and we had discussions about how that could work, and they were always there to help us change it or suggest different ways of doing it. This ended up with a successful project and a good relationship between both us and Content Stack, but also London Luton Airport and Content Stack.